We would like to welcome Tom N5HYP from Irving, Texas,
Ooh.
joining us tonight to talk about satellites and communicating with satellites. Tom's got he's a part of the AMSAT organization. He's an ambassador for them, as well as very active in the local Texas chapter of AMSAT. And Tom has also got some other things in common with TARC, in that he's very active with the Scouts, like several of our members are. So, Tom, we would like to welcome you to our TARC Talks tonight. We're going to give you the floor. Usually, what we do is let you do your presentation, and then we will ask for questions and open up the mics afterwards. So,
Sure.
but
And I want, yeah, unfortunately, well, first of all, COVID has made some of the scout stuff very difficult. Um, just because I was asked to do a radio merit badge in a couple of weekends, and I just, I can't see it, especially in the location they wanted to do it, which is a really small, probably 15 by 15 room, and I just says it's just, and I'm older, and my wife is, uh, you know, in a has mitigating, health things, so I don't want to get COVID, and I don't want her to. So I pushed that off until March. And we used to have a really cool opportunity because the National Scouting Museum was in Irving, and they let us just run wild there. We did jamborees on the air. I had merit badges. We could just show up at 7 o'clock in the morning to set up. The security people, oh, you're coming. And we had the place the whole day, and we could climb on the roof and put up antennas when we wanted to, and it was great. But they're closed now. They moved it to Philmont Scout Ranch, so I don't have that venue anymore. Anyway, thank you very much for inviting me to the evening tonight. I understand that you guys have a clubhouse and that you are working on rehabbing a satellite station for that. So hopefully this talk will, for those of you who don't know what amateur radio in space is all about, that this will um, whet your interest some. Um, um, those, and maybe give you some ideas on terms and stuff that you need to know uh, in making sense out of this, and then give you some uh, concepts of where to look to find more information and what more to do besides playing with FM satellites. So if it's okay with you, I'm going to share the presentation that I got. There we go. You should, oops, there we go. That's me in the driveway. I am driveway portable there, and we're going to see a little bit of video from that later on, using my FT847, uh, uh, and that's an Alaskan. That's a regular. That's the Alaskan arrow on the tripod there. That's and we'll describe that a little more later on. What we're going to do is we're going to have a little introduction to AMSAT. Yeah, a little shameless promotion, but and then we'll get into getting started on FM satellites, because a lot of the terminologies and things that you need to know uh, um, are easy to implement with FM. And then we're going to do talk about more to do than just FM. So there we go. Radio Amateur Satellite Corporation is what is known as AMSAT. It's been around since '69. Been involved with getting and keeping amateur radio in space, but amateur radio in space predates AMSAT, because Oscar 1 was launched in 1961. It was the very first rideshare satellite. It's the goal to foster amateur radio's participation in space research and communications. It's always been kind of, amateur radio has always been somewhat of homebrew type venture, and AMSAT is just as much. I mean, the Fox satellites, which we'll talk about in a minute, were ultimately put together in Jerry Buxton's garage pretty much in Fox Labs. Um, and in the organization, there has been involved with a number of different satellites. AO7, of course, which was launched in 1973, is still active. Only in sunlight, but it is still active. Recently, the Fox series of satellites, which were CubeSats, we'll describe that in a minute. There have been 5 of them total built. 4 of them have been launched. The only one left over that's still functioning properly is AO91. Batteries are an issue, as we'll talk about in a little bit. A CubeSat, which is a standardized form factor for small satellites. Now there are other form factors, and older satellites kind of the designers just kind of made it to fit whatever space frame and however what their electronics looked like. But back in the late 90s, a guy by the name of Bob Twiggs, who was at that time a instructor, a professor at Cal Poly, came up with a concept for a small satellite that would be a standardized frame. Actually, the story goes he was, had a space aeronautics design class, and he was trying to figure out things for them to do. And sorry about that. He went to Hobby Lobby, and he saw one of those 10 centimeter cubes, those clear plastic cubes that you put like baseballs or memorabilia in. And he went, wow. And he brought that back to his class and said, I want you to build a space frame that's this size. And they did. They came up with the CubeSat, and they came up with a launcher concept for it too, called the Peapod. And that became the basis for CubeSat designs. Most CubeSats these days are launched into low Earth orbit. You can see by this breakout here, our CubeSats are a combination of a board stack that is a transmitter, a receiver, an IHU, or a internal computer, basically a small processor that runs the thing, and a battery card. But then the upper 4 cards, AMSAT has given opportunities for universities to create experimental payloads, and that's how AMSAT North America has got a number of free launches through the Educational Launch of Nanosatellites program. This type of sharing helps provide options for schools that want to participate. Virginia Tech has provided cameras on several of our satellites. Iowa State and Vanderbilt University have done some radiation effects experiments that have been on cards. Penn State has had a MIMS gyro concept on all of our Fox satellites. We're still waiting on one more to be launched, Fox 1E, which is Fox 1A, B, C, and D were all FM transponders, crossband repeaters. Fox 1E is going to be a linear transponder satellite in preparation for the next tier of satellites that AMSAT North America is working on, which is called Gulf, Greater Orbit, Larger Footprint. And there's going to, Gulf T is a technology experimenting platform where we're going to try some newer concepts with different modes and different frequency bands. Gulf 1 and Gulf T has already gotten an approval for AMSAT for a NASA Atlanta free launch. There's also the first of the Gulf 1 series satellites has also got one, but we're not expecting to see Gulf T until maybe 2021, and Gulf first of the Gulf 1 satellites until at least 2022 or 2023. Things have kind of slowed down a little bit with COVID. And another cool thing that AMSAT has done is we've decided, well, of course, you'd love to get amateur radio on every university satellite. And there's a lot of them up there that have, universities have created CubeSats, but, you know, they may use amateur radio frequencies for downlinks, but not for communications. So the goal is to try to get amateur radio as a communications platform on every university satellite. So AMSAT has agreed to provide linear transponder stacks, basically the transmitter, receiver, and the IHU board stacks for CubeSat to any university that wants it. The University of Washington HuskySat-1 was the first one. It was a 3-unit CubeSat. That's the image on the right. And it lasted up there for several months, but has since failed due to overheating. It's when there's no air, it's a little harder to dissipate heat in space. And when it experienced a long period of sunlight, it got too hot, and pretty much the radio side died. University of Maine has now contracted with AMSAT. We'll be hosting one of the new transponder boards, hopefully in 2022, I think. They're in design mode right now. So, of course, there are AMSAT North America is here, but there are AMSAT organizations all around the world. AMSAT UK, AMSAT Germany, AMSAT Australia, some JAMSAT. Some of them have been involved with satellite projects of their own. So there's a lot of interest in amateur radio and space all around the world. So we encourage membership. Be an AMSAT because it helps fund the various projects that the organization is involved with, as well as given and that's a good thing, but there's also some good educational support and good beginners materials that are available for AMSAT members. So and awards as well. So let's get started with the FM satellites. I'm sure if you've been to any ham fest of any decent size, whether it be Hamvention or whether it be Hamcation or any of the other major ham fests, there's been some AMSAT people that have been outside doing satellite passes. And so we're gonna talk about how you get started with FM satellites, because that's kind of an easy place to get started. I mean, most of us have FM handhelds of some kind, and maybe FM mobiles, and those are, and the current crop of FM satellites are actually very easy to hit with a 5-watt handheld, one or two of them. And I'll explain the concept of full duplex in just a minute here. So we're going to talk about what equipment do I need? How do I know where the satellite's going to be? How do I know what frequency to be on? How do I track a satellite manually or with, and talking about polarization, and what do you say during a typical QSO, and some best operating practices? Well, our caveman friend here does have an aero antenna on his club, and he wants to get on the air. So let's see if we can help him out a bit. There are several different types of amateur radio satellites: FM repeaters, linear transponders for SSB and CW. There's some digital packet satellites, PSK 31, etc. Specialty mode digital voice type satellites, and definitely a lot of telemetry only satellites that are out there. What equipment do I need? Well, to do FM, the minimum you need is a dual band transceiver that can simultaneously transmit and receive on either VHF and UHF, uh, and receive on the other band at the same time, and let you hear um, the downlink while you're transmitting on the uplink. That's called full duplex. You can get away with that with two half duplex um, transceivers that may be dual band but not be dual band and dual listen. Um, or you can use a VHF like a mobile rig as one radio, and there are some mobile rigs that can do full duplex as well. The whole point is you really want to be able to hear yourself, and there's a lot of good reasons why, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Just realize that not all dual band transceivers are full duplex. Not all advertised full duplex transceivers are truly full duplex, and not all receivers are created equally. The receiver on your Bofang is probably not as good as the receiver on a older ICOM W32A or on a Kenwood D72A. So, yeah, and I was coaching a guy from up in the Northeast, and he was trying to use a couple of a Bofang, and he just could never hear anything. He finally got a different radio, and he went, "It's amazing! I can actually hear the thing." So it not all radios are created equal. You do get what you pay for. The D72, these are that's radio I have. I also have a W32A which is an older ICOM radio, but that has some problems with desense. This is a list of on top the full duplex radios that really are fairly good. If you do have one of the older W32As, um, uh, you have a good radio. If you have a newer one like I do, it doesn't work very well when you're doing VHF up and UHF down. And it says on the bottom here that there are some radios that say they're full duplex, but really aren't good for, like I said, VHF up and UHF down. And the reasoning for that is UHF is a harmonic. The 70 centimeter band is a harmonic of 2 meters. And so it's very easy for the harmonics or even low power harmonics from the 2 meter transmit to get in and corrupt the 70 centimeter receive. And so then you get desense on the receiver side of the radio. The W32 that I have desenses really badly if you transmit on 2 meters and receive on 70 centimeters. But the W32, I mean, the D72 works pretty well. It's not perfect, but it does work decent. And I think that's the kind of the handheld of choice for most FM. Mobile rigs, there are a bunch of capable dual band, dual listen, full duplex radios that will work really nicely to do amateur radio FM satellites. And here's a list of them here. I like the Yaesu 8800, 8900 are good for that. That the D700 to D710s radios like that really work well. We'll talk about this later on some more, but full duplex all mode radios like the IC 9700, the 9100, the 820, the 821H, older radios, the 910H, which is a very, again, an older ICOM radio, but it's small, it's very portable, it's really cool. If you can find an IC 970, that's a nice radio too. Kenwood did have the TS7 790 and then the TS2000. The 2000 is a nice satellite radio, but it does have a birdie problem, especially for a couple of FM satellites. Yaesu has over the years had a number of full duplex capable VHF all mode radios, but The last one they produced was the 847, which is what I own. It was went out of life in about 2000 or something like that. Or of course you could buy a couple of smaller radios, the Yaesu FT 817 and 818s in a pair, make a good all mode full duplex system, utilizing the different colors of the display can help you to keep track of which radio you're working with and which band you're working with. The key to reliable satellite operation is put together the best receive station that you can, and that starts with the antenna. Of course, there's a bunch of several commercial options out there, but there's also some homebrew designs that are really good. Of course, the Arrow, I like the Arrow the best of the commercial ones. It's a dual band, dual antenna, cross pole, 2-meter and 70-centimeter antenna. That's me on the Maine coast, trying to work some DX across the Atlantic on the FM satellites. The Alaskan Arrow is 4 elements on 2 meters and 10 elements on 70 centimeters. It's just a little harder to hold with your hands. It's a little heavier. You can get a split boom or a diplexer with that. And the split boom is standard now, but the used to not be. Diplexer that they offer is only a 10-watt capable. So if you're going to drive a bigger radio, you need a bigger duplexer. The elk antenna is another commercial one. It's a log periodic that was designed for 2 meters, but happened to be resonant on 70 centimeters. I don't like it as well. It doesn't balance as well in my hand, and I don't think it works as well. But some people like it, and there are times it's just easier for me to transport that thing around than the Arrow. There's a couple of homebrews here. This one, VE2ZAZ, you can go to his website that I list here. He has some very good, it's a very inexpensive to build cross beam, and I've never tried to build that one, but it apparently works pretty well. And of course, there's Kent Britton WA5VJB's cheap Leo antenna. It's again it's a inline 2-meter and 70 centimeter antenna that you can build. He has designed for a little homebrew duplexer. You wind the coil on a pencil. And use welding rod is what he uses there. So he claims you can build the thing for about 20 bucks. I've known several people to build it. The welding rod is a little hard to solder to, and that's kind of one of the wraps on the design of using welding rod is it's just hard to solder wires directly to it. And I had a friend who built one, and she never could get it to really work well until she got rid of the duplexer and just made 2 unique connections from 2 separate radios, and then it worked a lot better. Make sure that you either build coax connectors on the end of your coax leading from your antenna that will match what your radio does, or you need a good quality adapter. I have several little boxes of adapters of all different types that I take along with me whenever I go any place, because you never know what's going to break and what type of cables you have to use. So adapters are your friends. They don't the person whose image this came from, apparently they don't like the very small nut type SMA connector screw on. They would rather recommend you can buy these with a fatter knurled base. And I had one of those. I gave it to a young lady who I've been coaching into satellites. When you go out, if you're going to go out portable in your backyard or portable specifically, you will want some extra things. A compass is a good thing, either on your phone or a real one. An audio recorder is a good thing because things happen pretty fast and it's really hard to hold an antenna, hold a radio, and write at the same time. A good collection of adapters, some headphones, because if you're using a handheld radio, if you're using it, trying to get mine, pop out here. The speaker is always right next to the microphone. And so if you are doing full duplex and you transmit, you will feed back on yourself and nobody will hear you. So you'll want some form of way to separate the speaker, the output audio from your microphone. I even use speakers or a splitter like they have here that can help do that. There's a lot of good satellite tracking apps out there. They'll help you find when the AOS time for a particular satellite, when the AOS, when you'll first hear the signal, when it's going to be closest to you, and when it's going to be leaving your vicinity. There's also computer software that can do both rig and rotor control. And there's past predictions from AMSAT, a text-based thing. I'll show you that. N5HYP and Heavens Above also have some websites that will help you with that. I'm not a big fan of SatSat. It is good. It costs about $7 for iOS. I love GoSat Watch. It has some great graphics. For Android, there's ISS Detector Pro, not just ISS Detector, the free one, because that'll only let you see the ISS. But Detector Pro is the one that'll let you look at all sorts of satellites, including amateur radio. And AMSAT Droid Free is an old, but it's functional. Program that was developed by a person from AMSAT UK. He was going to create a commercial version, a paid version that had more features, but he just ran out of ability to be able to do that. So it never happened. You can still find the free version out there though. For PC, SAT PC 32, that's the program, and Mac Doppler, both of which are sold through the AMSAT website, and proceeds benefit AMSAT North America here in the United States. SAT PC 32 has been around for like 25 years. The developer still supports it. DK1TB Eric Eichmann from Germany. You get an error message though, it will pop up in German. So nine will show up sometimes. So that's kind of interesting, but it will control two radios. It will also control rotors, and Mac Doppler to do the same thing. If you're into Linux or even Windows and Mac, there is a version of a program called gpredict, which is it's a freebie program. I guess it's open source, but it's pretty much free. Which has ports for Mac, Windows, Linux, and it can do multiple radios and rotors as well. That's maybe a good start, but SAT PC 32 has a lot of support. And if you have a problem with it, you email Eric and he will email you back with an answer. I even actually found a bug that in the 847 routine that he didn't see 25 years ago. And he made a fix to the executable to fix the bug after 20 some odd years. So there we go. AMSAT Argentina has a fun satellite tracking site called PASS, which lets you actually see Doppler shift and as-L positioning and such like that. And N5HYP is good as well for both the ISS and for almost every other publicly available satellite. And of course, there's the good old AMSAT website, past prediction, which gives you a text base. This is how I got started. You enter in your grid square or your latitude and longitude and the satellite that you want to look at, and click predict, and it'll give you a list of the next 10 to 50 passes that will be coming over your neck of the woods. So that's how I got started. I wrote down my numbers or printed out a page and ran outside. Well, a lot of terms, he says. Speak English. Ugh. Well, we're going to talk about the time that a satellite is visible in range to a ground station is called a satellite pass. Now, we are right now, the only satellites that we have available to us over North America are low Earth orbiting, which means, and they anywhere from 250 miles up for the ISS to about 1,000 miles up for RS-44. There had been satellites in the past that went up to 30, 40,000 miles back in the AO40 days, and AO10 and RS-13 had some very high apogees, and they would hang in the sky for hours on end. Not so much. The ISS passes are about 10 minutes along. The an RS-44 pass at about 1,000 miles up is about 23 minutes long. In that area that when the satellite, we can see the satellite and the satellite can see us, is known as its footprint. Of course, the altitude makes a big difference in how big that footprint is and how long the passes go for. I got a couple of videos here. Of course, this is just showing a whole lot of, from GoSat Watch, a whole lot of satellites. I'm kind of zooming out to the geostationary arm. Hold on, there we go. Geostationary or geosynchronous belt, which is at 22,300 miles out. The concept is the orbital time for the satellite is the exact time duration as one revolution of the Earth. So here you're seeing Galaxy 14, which is a, did it stop? There it goes. A commercial a telecommunications satellite out over the Pacific, and it seems to stay in the same place as the Earth's orbit continues to move. There are other satellites called geosynchronous satellites that, although they stay in the same relative position over the Earth, they have a slight inclination, and so over the course of a 24-hour period, the satellite appears to wobble in the sky. GPS satellites are at about 12,000 miles, and so they still have a fairly large footprint, but they all are at fairly highly inclined orbits. The whole concept, of course, with GPS is that if you can see 8 to 10 of them over the horizon at a time, that is how your GPS device then coordinates and calculates your location based on the signals coming off of the GPS. This is an image showing you the size of the footprint for the ISS at about 251 miles up. This is AO7, which is up about 900 miles. You can see the footprint's a lot larger. From the East Coast of the United States, especially the northern East Coast, you can easily work Europe. Down there in Florida, you'd have, like me in Texas, we can't. Here in Texas, I think you can barely reach Hawaii on AO7 or RS-44, but someday we'll get some higher orbital satellites. We're working on it. That's what we're working on. Talk about uplink and downlink. Again, most satellites, not all, most amateur satellites work on multiple bands. And so they'll have an uplink on one band and a downlink on the other. That leads us to the scenario of Doppler shift. Satellites moving at 17,000 miles an hour, just like a train whistle or a truck horn coming past you with audio, as the frequency that that horn is putting out seems higher as it's approaching to us, and then seems lower as it's going away. Same for satellites. When we're listening, on 2 meters, the Doppler shift is about 3.5 kilohertz. On 70 centimeters, it's about 9.5 kilohertz. On 1.2 gigs, it's almost 30 kilohertz plus or minus. So the percentage is still the same, but the span of frequency that's covered in the Doppler shift will widen. So again, when listening to a downlink, we may have to compensate for Doppler shift. So here we go, looking at the downlink of, say, one of the Fox satellites. We start, this is actually the uplink frequency, I'm sorry, that we're talking about here. The uplink on the Fox satellites is on UHF. So the satellite thinks it's standing still and we're moving. So we end up actually have to do a kind of a reverse Doppler to make our frequency appear at the satellite proper, as opposed to a satellite like SO50, which has a 70 centimeter downlink. And so on the downlink side, we will start at about 10 kilohertz above the satellite's proper transmit frequency, and then slowly move our way down as the satellite approaches TCA, or time of closest approach, and then continue on downward past that. This is kind of a very fast time lapse of a AO91 pass. You can see it coming up from South America across the Pacific. That's entire time from the beginning of footprint to end of footprint is about 12 or 13 minutes. Raffaretti, he says he's getting impatient. I don't want to get hit by his club. So what frequency do I need to be on? It says, yeah, it depends upon which satellite you want to work. The convention is, if we're talking about a crossband satellite of some kind, the uplink band is capitalized at the beginning of the list, like UV. And so U would be capitalized, and V for the downlink would be lowercase or a smaller letter. They used to have a whole bunch of different esoteric modes: mode A, mode J, mode Z, mode H, for different band combinations, but that got real confusing. So it seems to have, as we've kind of stabilized on VHF and UHF in the last number of years, that the conventions have kind of switched to giving the actual designator for the band, L band for 1.2 gigs, C band for 3.4, the band we're losing, X band for C band. Well, actually C band also counts for the 5.8, X band for 10 gigs, and up from there. There are, again, some satellites that are planned. The Chinese have announced a couple of, one that will be at 15 meters up and a 10 meters down, and another one that will be a 15 meters up and 435 down. So again, we're going to end up with some form of H and U type combinations for those. Again, FM satellites are repeaters. They are easy to hear. They're easy to work. You can hear it with your ducky. You can hear AO91 with your duck antenna. I wouldn't try using that to transmit on because you're just not going to have enough gain if there's anybody else, you will get buried as a double. But because they are FM and single channel, you can only have one functional QSO at a time. I've got a little chart here that kind of shows how one would program AO91 into your radio. I would put one memory only for the downlink, and then I would have like 5 different memories for the uplink frequency, and so I would leave the downlink alone on my radio, but I would have to tune the uplink memories appropriately. Looking at SO50, which is a 2 meters up and a 70 centimeter down. In this case, I would program one memory only for the downlink, for the uplink, I'm sorry, but I'd program 5 or 6 memories depending upon the uplink. And part of the reason for that is SO50 does have a little bit of a variation in their in its downlink frequency. Some days it can be actually relatively low, like 4 or 5 kilohertz lower than published. And so for the first month, I couldn't find it because I was too high. Another good FM satellite, PO101, Daiwata 2. Oh, by the way, PL tones. Almost every satellite that is up there today does use a PL, usually 67 hertz. However, Daiwata 2, PO101, it was kind of an exception. They had a PL of 141.3. Only thing about PO101 is it's not always on. It's only turned on via schedule, and they'll announce it on Twitter when they're gonna. It's a Philippines satellite, and they'll announce it on Twitter. Of course, you can find a benefit for AMSAT membership is this handy dandy frequency guide, which you used to be able to which you used to get as a hard copy thing when you became an AMSAT member. Now they're making it as a PDF download, and you can print it out and laminate it yourself. And it's got every current satellite plus a few future ones that are available. So you need to know again where this, and all this stuff is applicable when you get into the linear satellites and other different modes as well. You need to know AOS azimuth, what time and what direction on the compass. And we're talking true north, not magnetic. TCA, time of closest approach, which direction you're going to be pointing and how high. And LOS, loss of signal. And one of the things that new people to amateur satellites, they get real paranoid about making sure that they're actually pointing exactly at the satellite. Well, like your aero antenna has like a 15-degree beam width, so you don't have to be exactly pointing at it. You can be close and it'll still work just fine. So but because most CubeSats don't have any form of stabilization, they may be rotating and tumbling. So you're constantly going to be dealing with fades, and you're constantly going to be dealing with polarity changes and of course, you're going to try to match the polarity of your antenna with the satellite's antenna. But since the satellite's constantly moving, and since on these CubeSats, we're not, there's no room to put a big circularly polarized beam or a big 2-meter satellite dish on a 10 by 10 by 10 centimeter CubeSat. So they just use little linear quarter wave whips. So as the satellite moves, and as the satellite moves in relation to you, and as the satellite is rotating or tumbling, that whip antenna orientation is going to change in comparison to your antenna. Now, for fixed installations, you can get away with some cool things like having circular polarization, a dual say a cross set of 2-meter and 70 centimeter Yagis that you then phase so that one is either 90 degrees out, right-hand polarization or left-hand polarization. But it's on average, you can get away in a portable operation just fine with a crossed Yagi, and just kind of flip the antenna as you go. And this is kind of like a basic FM because it's a single channel resource and because there's a lot of people trying for it. There's no time for long QSOs. So basically, right here, I've detailed about what it takes to make a legitimate QSO for VUCC credit. And an important point, never call CQ satellite on an FM satellite specifically, because again, you're wasting time. You're wasting that precious single channel resource. Yeah, you can self-announce. You can say that, hey, this N5HYP EM12. Hope somebody else will come back to you. You know, this is just some information about what you prep for, and program a radio, use headphones or speaker, have ability to record because things happen fast. Pick a location where you have a good clear view of the horizon, and just more hints and tips here. And you may think you need 3 hands, and if you'll note, his microphone is up above his head, so he's not really he's not going to be heard very well, and his 3 hands are pretty busy, but you can do this. It's very doable. Listening is just a really great way to get started. Take the time, spend a lot of time, listen to how passes work, follow it, take time to follow it yourself with an antenna. And you'll learn a lot. You'll learn the procedures, and you'll learn familiar calls, and that's a good way to work. So that's more operating tips and best practices. I'll have this presentation available. I did want to make a mention about the Iss Crossband Repeater. That has gotten a lot of press since the new interoperable radio system that Eris put up on the ISS was launched in March and finally installed back the end of August, beginning of September. It was in crossband mode, which is one of the modes that was intended for it. And then about 7 weeks ago, after an Eris contact, it was switched back into APRS mode. You can go to the Eris website, aris.org, ariss.org, and they do have a status page, which is really hard to find because there's no direct link for it that I could find. But it tells you the status of the ISS radios. And I think you could just do a Google search for ARISS status of Eris radios, and it'll tell you what the Columbus module, the new interoperable system, what mode it's in, and will tell you what the mode of the radio that's in the Russian segment is in. But there's I'll show you another trick to tell what's going on with that too. Oh, I just knocked my sign off the placard here. Now we're going to talk about linear satellites, beyond FM, linear transponder satellites. Of course, with FM satellites, they're listening to a single frequency, 5 kilohertz wide, but it's designed to be an always on type scenario with as FM. A linear transponder listens to a swath of frequencies and then retransmits what it hears exactly as it hears on a different swath of frequency. So in this case, I have a linear, the diagram on the right-hand side shows a particular satellite's uplink and downlink passbands, and then you can see my little chart. It's an inverting concept. You uplink on LSB and you downlink on USB. And you'll note that in this case, the edge of the uplink passband on 145.930 translates to the other end of the downlink passband. This is reversed here. You transmit, the satellite is transmitting on USB because it's flipping it. I got to fix that chart. I just noticed that. This is kind of it's a little confusing. You will transmit your radio on lower sideband. If you transmit on the bottom end, say, of the passband, it will come out on the other end of the transmit passband from the satellite. That's what's called inverting. In the concept of inverting the transponder does help a little bit with Doppler shift, but it doesn't mitigate it, but it does help a bit. Again, we'll going back to multi-mode radios that can do this. I guess you guys have a 9700 at your location. They're going to be doing it for satellite. The 9700 does work with SatPC32 and other programs. My understanding that you're going to discover if you use them is that it only updates the transmit frequency intermittently. And it does have some issues with snapback, meaning if you tune, you have to change your frequency on the transmit side via the software. Don't use the tuning knob on the radio to do it because it does not interact bidirectionally with the radio. The 847 that I have does interact. Later serial numbers of it, which is one I have, do react nicely, so I can actually tune the radio and have the software properly follow that as well. You can also use the various dongles or SDRs. The nice thing about SatPC32 is it can control two radios, and it can control the SDR as the receiver, like the FunQ dongle, and it can control my 847 as a transmitter. And I've used it a number of times that way. It's kind of cool. It lets you have the passband that the band scope that the 9700 does, but on your computer. There even are some transmit capable SDRs, but you also need to build an amplifier because none of them have a lot of power out. Again, the program SatPC32 and such. HRD, Ham Radio Deluxe, does have a sat tracking program, but it does have some issues, and there's even been some issues talked about just recently on the AMSAT bulletin board, the mail list. And Sdr Radio Console is another application built by a guy by the name of Simon Brown. in England. It does have a satellite tracking mode, and it can also control an external radio. It is a little difficult to get working, but it does work pretty well. And so you can also, besides doing FM and besides doing sideband and CW, you can do APRS, the D72, the D74. There's a couple of Yaesu radios, the Kenwood mobiles that can do APRS and can do full duplex. The cool thing about APRS on APRS on the ISS is it is the same frequency up as it is down. There is a satellite called FalconSat 3 that does 9600 baud AX25, and it is actually a crossband. It uplinks on 70 centimeters, I think, and 2 meters, and downlinks on 70, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, there's another cool mode. NO84 and NO104 have the capability of doing PSK 31, an uplink on 10 meters, and a downlink on 70 centimeters FM. And the cool part about that, excuse me, I'm going to take a drink here, is you're uplinking in USB on 10 meters, but the downlink on FM, so everybody hears the passband as an FM audio signal. And if you look on the diagram, and there's a program called Doppler Psk, which actually just controls the audio frequency to compensate out of your sound card interface, the audio frequency of that to compensate for Doppler. So on the right hand, looking at whatever your PSK software of choice, the signal that's on the left hand side of the screen is a constant data stream coming off of PCSat. The stable signal kind of in the right center is a Doppler corrected PSK signal that the satellite's receiving. The one with the slope is a terrestrial PSK signal that is not being Doppler corrected. And so obviously the satellite's receiving that with a ongoing shift. So that's kind of cool. That's a good mode. Of course, there's a lot of satellites that have data downlinks. And they may publish software that amateur radio operators can use to downlink the data and then push it up to a online data warehouse like the FunCube warehouse. AMSAT's Fox Telem program is one of them. DK3WN's set blog has a status page that also has links to any of the bleepsats up there that have telemetry decoders that you can download. There's another group called SatNogs that has developed a protocol for automated data downlinks from amateur radio satellites, and then posting the received data and even the received audio files onto the SatNogs website. The best book to learn about this stuff is the Getting Started with Amateur Satellites book from AMSAT. It was earlier this year only as a digital download, but there's now a print version available. $15 for the download, $25 for the print version, and it's updated yearly. And it's the best resource. It'll take you from dead nothing to how to improve your station and how to go to the next levels. AMSAT website has a lot of good resources. They have a communications satellites page, which will list both. They have a listing of FM repeater satellites and linear transponder satellites, their current and you can tell which satellites are currently operational versus which ones are proposed in the future. The satellite status page, which is a very cool page. You can, and remember I mentioned before about the changing status of the ISS FM repeater, or PO101, being on a schedule. This is the place you go. You go to amsat.org, satellite info, current status, and you can hover over any one of the colored dots and find out where in the world people have actually made heard the particular satellite and then made a report on that. The AMSAT Journal is the benefit of AMSAT members. Every 2 months comes out with a bunch of different articles that are of interest to both beginners and technical people alike. Let's do some questions first, and then if we have a little more time, I got a video I want to show you guys. You there? Am I still there?
Hello.
Hey, I'm here.
Just a question that you had mentioned, high orbit, etc. Is there any hope of getting something like S-Hail in this hemisphere?
Oh, well, yeah, we'd
I
love
love
that.
listen.
No.
I've been listening to that thing on. It's just fabulous.
No, it is. Agreed. But so first of all, we need a rich uncle.
Yeah.
One thing, because geo launches aren't cheap. Or a company, in this case, it was a Qatar-owned
Qatari
company,
broadcaster. Yeah.
Qatari broadcast company that owned it, and they worked a deal with AMSAT Germany to kind of create the hosted transponder. About 3 years ago, we had a shot at this. There was some work being done from Virginia Tech and through a U.S. government satellite, FEMA, that was actually looking at a hosted transponder that would assist in emergency communications. Unfortunately, that whole satellite project kind of fell by the wayside from budgets. So the option is no longer there. There's still hope, but again, it's a cost thing. Yeah, it's not saying that it can't be done.
Talk to Uncle Elon, see if he wants to.
Yes, yeah, Uncle Elon, but Uncle Elon needs to be interested in amateur radio, and I don't think he is right now. We just have to try. Anything else? What else? I'm sure I drove everybody nuts here. Crickets? I'll tell you what I want to do. Hold on here. I want to go back to screen sharing. And I want to click here. Okay, you should see my video up on the screen. EMO2, EMO3. Yes, no? Hello, anybody? Can you tell? Does anybody? You see it? Okay. I did a portable operation. I was asked by a guy to activate EMO3. I'm an EM12, so I'm not far away from here. But I was asked to go out because he needed 20 grid squares to get his Gridmaster award. There are 488 Maidenhead grid squares in the contiguous lower 48 states. And that's one of the awards you can earn. VUCC is 100 confirmed grid squares. There are amateur there are operators who have gotten close to 2,000 grid squares on just the LEOs without, there have been operators that have gotten DXCC satellite on the LEOs as well. So that's hard. You got to be in the right spot, but it is doable. So I went out in the field. I'm not going to play this part because it's kind of noisy, but because I kind of demoed the same stuff that I did here. But a little bit here, you should hear some odd. Come on, where's the play button? Oh, I got into the.
This is November 5, Hotel Yankee Papa, N5HYP, EM02, EM03.
You can actually hear me coming back on my speaker. And I'm trying to find the satellite. It's there. It's just come over the horizon. And there's a lot of cars. Hang in there.
Papa X-ray from N5HYP. Whiskey India 4 Tango from N5, Hotel Yankee Papa, EMO2, EMO3. Hello there.
Hotel Papa 2 Victor X-ray, 59.
The WI4T was the guy that asked me to give him the grid square. So I was right on the line, and or hopefully close enough for government work. And we've all seen you've all seen these, and that's I went a little while later on, and I went a little farther up the road just to work another pass.
Victor Echo 4, Victor Echo 4, Mike from N5HYP. I got you, and I'm EMO3.
A lot of noise there, but FM passes.
KB3,
FM passes can be very noisy and crowded, and a lot of interference and such like that. But I'm going to show you the linear transponder difference. Working SSW.
So today we are driveway portable. I have my regular Arrow antenna mounted on a tripod over here. The Arrow antenna, of course, is a standard Arrow, is 7 elements on UHF and 3 elements on VHF. I've got it mounted in such a way with a friend who did a 3D printed mount plate here for my tripod mount so that I can flip it. I can then make it move azimuthally. I can also unlock and tilt elevation. All this manually, of course, because at this point I don't have a mechanical rotor system.
And there are some good homebrew projects out there for that.
So of course there's 2 antennas, and they can feed 2 different antenna ports on, 2 different antenna ports on my FT847. I'll show you in just a minute. I do use duplexers to act as bandpass filters. In this case, the 2-meter antenna coated in orange is coming down to the 2-meter input of this diplexer, and then the output's feeding directly to the radio because I'm going to be transmitting on 2 meters. On the 70 centimeter side, I've got a 70 centimeter duplex duplexer as well to act as a bandpass filter. And that is feeding an ARR preamp, and the output of which is feeding back into the radio. So we're going to sit down at the desk here for just a minute. I've got a couple of other things going on here. I've got GoSat Watch, my favorite iPhone and iPad app, tracking RS-44 right now. And I can look at what its current elevation and current azimuth are.
Way below the horizon at this point.
And I can see a upcoming path of where the satellite will be. I've got my FT847, which is right now in satellite mode, being controlled by SatPC32 on the laptop here. SatPC32 allows very accurate Doppler correction, provided you have the location correct and the time correct, and that you have downloaded current orbital elements for the particular satellite that you're working with. Okay, we're a couple of minutes away from RS-44 or AOS. It's going to be coming around 7:19 this evening, or 1919 local, or 0019 UTC. It's going to be starting
And
pretty well
I just realized something. I have my graphic backwards.
maximum elevation will be 35
I am
degrees
downlinking on
to
USB, not
east,
LSB.
and then it'll be
I've got
trailing
those
off to the
backwards.
southeast from there. I'm going to have to do this differently. There's me.
I'm using the paddles.
Okay, so satellites come over the horizon.
And up in the
I can
upper
hear
right-hand
myself
corner is
when I'm
actually the
peeing.
real-time
I'm going to switch back to
what
SSB.
GoSat Watch is seeing at this moment.
November 5, Hotel Yankee Papa.
From W03T.
WO3T from N5 Hotel Yankee Papa in Echo Mike 12. Again, this is November 5 Hotel Yankee Papa N5HYP. November 5 Hotel Yankee Papa in Echo.
And I had in contrast to an FM pass, I had actually
Was it Echo November 00? Echo November 00, is that correct?
I had about a 5-7
Okay, I got you
conversation
as a
with this
Fox
guy.
November 00. I'm tuning myself in a little bit here. I am using an FT847 into a aero antenna on a tripod, so probably not the best signal in the world, but it works.
Oh, you're doing great. You're doing great. You're 5'9", no problem. Of course, all you have to do is get the satellite does the rest.
Even as I've been moving, the computer's been following my tracking.
See the frequencies up at the top bar, right kind of where the menu would, below the menu.
CQ satellite, CQ
So anyway.
satellite, CQ satellite from November 5, Hotel Yankee Papa, who have seen FM passes, because on a single channel repeater, the strongest signal wins, and you only get only get one conversation at a time. But the nice part about a 60 kilohertz wide SSB or CW transponder is there's a lot more room to work with. So my encouragement here is, yeah, the FM satellites are cool, the FM satellites are fun, but find a way to get into the linear satellites or some of the other things that are going on, like APRS over satellite, or even FT8 over satellite. That's kind of a new thing that's been experimented with and seems to work pretty well. So that being said, RS-44 is still just barely halfway through its pass, but I'm done. 73 to you all from Tom, N5HYP.
So there we go. It's a lot more leisurely on the linear birds, and you can actually have conversations with people. So I'm going to stop screen share. There we go. And that's it. That's all I got. Hope that you guys found this interesting and learned something. I can send a link. I have a Dropbox. Whoops, whoop, whoop. Hold it. Stop that. Hold on. I want to close that. How'd this happen? Hold on. Stop. There. I started playing again. So hopefully that you learned something from here. Hopefully it maybe brought up some more questions. I do encourage the Getting Started with the Amateur Satellite book because it does have a lot of great information. And I have a Dropbox link I can send. I can send you guys, and I have some handout type stuff. Also, AMSAT's going to be involved with the next virtual Ham Expo, the QSO Today event back in March, coming up in March, I should say. We'll have a booth this time around, so you can stop by and talk and ask questions as you go. Another thing I encourage is if you're interested, subscribe to the AMSAT BB. It's a mail list. You can get, instead of getting like 20 emails a day, you can get a single email that's a digest, and that's a good way to do it and find out what people are asking questions about and what answers are being given. That's a good thing. And get involved, play with it. You'll enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. It's a good challenge. So that's it.
What, Tom? Whatever happened to my favorite satellite, FO-29? Does anyone know?
Yes. Well, it's 20 some odd years old. The batteries are dying.
That thing rocked. It was like a contest every 15 minutes.
Well, no, it was great. I mean, it was a nice, again, pretty high, 100 kilohertz wide transponder.
Yeah.
Pretty high. So the passes were about 21, 22 minutes. Was always a lot of people. It was probably the most popular satellite for field day. But the batteries are dying. So what the Japanese folks, the controllers, they'll turn it on in the daylight over Japan, but it won't be in daylight by the time it gets here.
Yeah.
So it just kind of, runs out. So we haven't had FO-29 to use in a while, but RS-44, the one it's an interesting little satellite. It's a Russian thing. It was a amateur radio transponder on a Russian aeronautical university satellite, but it unfortunately the satellite never detached from the booster. So, and it's up at about an apogee of about 1,100 miles, perigee of about 900. So it's higher than FO-29. But because it's stuck on the booster and the booster's tumbling, it has a lot of fading to it. But the nice thing is it's a 5-watt transponder. The thing about transponders is they share, the power budget is shared amongst all the signals that it receives. Right. So if somebody transmits really strong, they grab more of the power budget, and then somebody else who's kind of weak or running a lower power into the satellite gets buried. So the idea is for the linear satellites, you really do use like no more than 5 watts into a beam, and that's more than sufficient to work one of those satellites from horizon to horizon. And RS-44 has a nice 5-watt power budget, so it's actually pretty strong on the downlink side. but you have to deal with, it's rather deep QSB.
Yeah.
But it's a good satellite. Is kind of taken over where FO29 has left off.
Yeah, thanks.
Any other questions for Tom before we close for the night?
Just a quick question, if I can, for Tom.
Sure.
Hey, on your transponder video, I didn't see you leaping up to move your antenna at all.
Well, again, here was kind of the advantage. First of all, RS-44 being higher wasn't moving. I was that from beginning to end on from the time I made first heard signal till the time I quit was only about 12 minutes, and I edited that a little bit there.
Okay.
But the whole point was because it was coming toward me, I really didn't have to move it very much. Again, remember I mentioned that the beam width is maybe 15, 20 degrees. So you, now on the lower satellites, if I were tracking the ISS, I would have probably had to jump up several times to move it. But RS-44 being about twice as long a pass, or more than that actually, it was, I didn't move it near the end,
Okay.
but not in the part that you saw. But you know, it you know, again, if I were really tracking it, or if I had a trackable rotor, it would have been moving some. But you know, it's strong enough, and I was getting in good enough that I didn't really have to get up and bounce it very far.
Yeah, the other question I had is how much power were you running on that contact?
On that, oh, less than 10 watts.
Wow.
Probably five. Really, you try to run as minimal power as possible. What I'll do is I'll kind of, the rule of thumb is, if the satellite has a beacon of some kind, like a CW beacon, look at what the signal strength on the beacon is. And then when you are uplinking and listening to yourself, try to make your signal strength down equivalent to the beacon. If you do that, then you're not overdriving the satellite, and you're not going to be hogging the satellite's power budget for yourself.
Okay.
AO7, being that it's only running on solar panels now, you have to be really careful about power. 5 watts is more than sufficient. In fact, it can, if there's enough people transmitting into it at high power, it'll actually cause the voltage coming from the solar panels through this to drop enough that it'll bounce the satellite into a different mode. And so on AO7, you just really run as little power as you can get to hear yourself.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Tom? Tom, thanks so much for spending the evening with us. We really appreciate it. Great information. And with us reestablishing our satellite station, this is going to be very helpful to a lot of our operators. By the way, we are recording this session tonight, and Dan will have it up on our website probably in the next few days. We'll let you know when that happens, so you can go back and listen again. And Tom, anything you want to share with the group, you just email it to me. I'll go ahead and pass it along to everyone else.
Yeah, I'll send a link along to you guys
Okay.
that you can, because I got a couple of papers, one that has a list of all the current and past FM handhelds, FM mobiles, and then there's one that has all mode radios, and then there's some other documents like the Fox operating guide, and just some other cool stuff. In fact, I even have a back issue of the AMSAT journal from back last spring, when I did something else last year. They offered it for free for a while. So I asked for permission to offer it as a freebie giveaway for these types of events. So they said yes. So there we go.
Well, great. We appreciate that. And definitely we'll have you back again for another session sometime in the near future.
Oh, I'd love to see how things go with your satellite station as you get, and I'd hope to work you someday on AMSAT Field Day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Again, thank you, Tom. Thank you, everyone, for being a part of our session tonight, and have a good evening.